The smallest coin can make the loudest sound when it is the last one you have. The first thing anyone noticed about the relief kitchen was never the smell of soup. It was the silence. Hundreds of voices filled the old transit terminal every morning, yet the line waiting for breakfast barely spoke above a whisper. Hunger had a way of teaching patience that comfort never could. Steam drifted from massive stainless steel kettles lined along the serving counter, carrying the warm scent of vegetable broth, fresh bread, herbs, and roasted root vegetables through the chilly building. Outside, icy rain tapped softly against reinforced glass panels while gray clouds swallowed most of the morning sky above Frontier Colony 12. The heating system struggled against the cold, filling the hall with an uneven hum that mixed with the clatter of trays and the occasional announcement from the aging station speakers. Men, women, children, humans and aliens from a dozen different worlds stood shoulder to shoulder beneath flickering lights, each holding a bowl, a cup, or a few carefully protected credits. Nobody complained. They simply waited. Near the front of the line stood a young alien woman wrapped in a faded blue travel cloak several sizes too large for her slender frame. Damp strands of silver hair escaped from beneath the hood, resting against skin the color of a quiet ocean beneath moonlight. Tiny bioluminescent markings shimmered faintly across her cheekbones whenever the overhead lights flickered. Her golden eyes remained lowered, focused entirely on the small collection of worn coins resting in her palm. One by one she counted them again. Then again. The tiny metallic clicks echoed louder in her ears than the conversations surrounding her. 5 coins. She paused, turned one over, counted once more. Still 5. The menu board hanging above the serving station glowed softly in blue letters. Vegetable soup. 6 colony credits. Fresh bread. Included. She closed her fingers around the coins for a brief moment before opening them again, almost as though another credit might appear through hope alone. It never did. The elderly human volunteer serving meals greeted each guest with the same tired smile. Bowls slid across polished steel counters one after another. Steam curled into the cold air. The line moved steadily closer. The alien girl reached the counter at last. She carefully placed the 5 coins onto the metal tray between herself and the volunteer. The tiny sound they made seemed impossibly small inside the crowded hall. "I am sorry," she said softly, speaking perfect standard English with only the faintest trace of an unfamiliar accent. "This is everything I have." The volunteer glanced toward the menu board before looking back at the coins. Kindness filled his expression, but kindness could not change prices set by the relief office. "You are 1 credit short," he replied gently. "I wish I could help." She nodded before he even finished speaking, as though she had already expected the answer. "I understand." She slowly reached forward to gather the coins again. Her movements remained calm and graceful, but there was something painfully familiar about the way she avoided meeting anyone's eyes. It was the quiet dignity of someone determined not to ask for more than the world wished to give. Behind her, the line continued growing. Boots shifted across the concrete floor. Children leaned against exhausted parents. An elderly alien lowered his gaze toward the empty bowl in his hands. Nobody complained. Nobody asked her to hurry. Yet the silence somehow became heavier. Near the entrance, the automatic doors slid open with a soft mechanical hiss, allowing another wave of cold air to sweep through the terminal. A tall human soldier stepped inside, carrying a weathered green duffel bag over one shoulder. His dark Navy service jacket still carried beads of rain across the fabric, and the faded unit patch on his sleeve showed years of use rather than ceremonial polish. Sergeant Daniel Brooks had just completed an overnight security patrol along the colony perimeter. His boots were damp. His shoulders ached. The only thing on his mind was finding a hot breakfast before reporting back to base. He removed one glove while walking toward the serving line, rubbing warmth back into stiff fingers. Then he heard it. 5 tiny coins sliding quietly back into someone's hand. He stopped without fully understanding why. Around him, people continued moving exactly as before. The heaters hummed. The soup simmered. Rain tapped steadily against the windows. Yet somehow those 5 coins had become the loudest sound in the entire room. Daniel Brooks remained where he was for another heartbeat, watching the young woman quietly sweep the 5 coins back into her palm with the care of someone handling something far more valuable than metal. She did not argue with the volunteer. She did not ask for an exception. She simply offered a polite nod that somehow carried more dignity than disappointment. The line behind her shifted forward by a few inches. Somewhere near the entrance, a child coughed softly before his mother wrapped another layer of worn fabric around his shoulders. The heaters continued humming overhead, never quite managing to chase the cold from the enormous terminal. Daniel glanced toward the glowing menu board, then back at the alien girl. One missing credit. Less than the price of a cup of station coffee. He had seen soldiers complain over far more meaningless inconveniences. Yet the expression on her face was not frustration. It was acceptance. That unsettled him more than hunger ever could. The volunteer reached beneath the counter to prepare the next tray, clearly wishing there were another answer to give. Daniel stepped forward before he had fully decided to move. His boots echoed softly against the polished concrete floor, drawing only a few curious glances from nearby travelers. He stopped beside the serving counter and removed the payment card from the inside pocket of his jacket. The plastic edges were scratched from years of use, and the military insignia printed across the front had faded almost white. He placed it gently on the stainless steel counter. "Please keep her order," he said in a calm voice. The volunteer looked up in surprise. "Sergeant, that is kind of you." Daniel shook his head slightly before the older man could process the payment. His eyes drifted past the young alien woman toward the long line stretching almost to the terminal doors. Humans, aliens, elderly workers, families carrying children still wrapped in blankets, tired faces waiting without complaint. He took a slow breath. "Actually," he said quietly, "make that everyone still standing in line." For a second, the only sound inside the terminal came from the bubbling soup kettles. Even the volunteer blinked as though he had misheard. "Everyone." Daniel nodded once. "If they are waiting for breakfast, feed them." The volunteer looked at the payment terminal, then at the growing line, mentally calculating a total that was certainly much larger than one missing credit. "Sergeant, are you sure?" Daniel smiled with the relaxed expression of someone who had already made peace with the decision. "I can always earn more money. They still need breakfast this morning." The volunteer hesitated only long enough to confirm the transaction. The payment terminal emitted a cheerful electronic tone before displaying a single green word across its screen. "Approved." The older man looked back at Daniel with quiet disbelief before his tired smile returned, brighter than before. "Then let us make this a good morning." He raised his voice just enough for those nearest the counter to hear. "Ladies and gentlemen, today's meals have already been paid for." At first, no one reacted. The announcement seemed too unexpected to believe. Then whispers slowly spread through the line like ripples across still water. People looked at one another, searching for whoever had done it. Daniel had already stepped aside, pretending to study the drink dispenser near the wall as though nothing unusual had happened. He had no interest in becoming the center of attention. The young alien woman remained frozen beside the counter, still holding the 5 worn coins in her hand. She slowly turned toward the soldier who was now carefully pouring himself a cup of plain hot water instead of coffee. Their eyes met for the first time. Her golden gaze carried confusion, gratitude, and something else she had almost forgotten existed. Hope. Daniel simply gave her a small nod before looking away, allowing her the quiet dignity of accepting kindness without the weight of an audience. Around them, bowls filled with steaming soup began sliding across the counter one after another. And for the first time that cold morning, the relief kitchen no longer sounded silent. It sounded alive. The volunteer placed a warm bowl onto the serving counter, followed by 2 thick slices of fresh bread wrapped in a clean cloth napkin. Steam rose gently into the cool air, carrying the rich scent of herbs and vegetables across the terminal. The young alien woman looked down at the meal without reaching for it immediately. Her fingers still rested around the 5 worn coins as though she had forgotten they were there. Around her, the line slowly came back to life. Parents accepted bowls with grateful smiles. Elderly workers carried trays toward empty tables. Children whose eyes had seemed dull only moments earlier suddenly brightened at the sight of warm food. Nobody rushed anymore. The atmosphere inside the terminal had quietly changed. Daniel picked up his own tray and walked toward a small table beside one of the large windows overlooking the rain-soaked landing platforms outside. He preferred sitting near the glass after night patrols. Watching ships arrive and depart somehow helped clear his thoughts before another shift began. He removed his damp gloves, wrapped both hands around the paper cup of hot water, and stared through the streaks of rain sliding down the window. Across the room, the young alien woman finally lifted her bowl. She carried it carefully with both hands, moving through the crowded dining hall with graceful, measured steps. Several empty chairs surrounded her, yet she passed each one without stopping. Daniel noticed her walking toward the far corner of the terminal where the lighting grew dimmer and fewer people chose to sit. Curiosity tugged quietly at him, though he had no intention of following. Then he saw what waited there. 3 young alien children sat together on a narrow bench beneath a broken information screen. Their clothing was patched repeatedly, and each child held an empty bowl that had not yet reached the serving line. The oldest could not have been older than 10 by human standards. The smallest rested against her shoulder, fighting sleep more than hunger. The young woman smiled gently as she approached them. Without hesitation, she tore one slice of bread into 3 equal pieces before handing one piece to each child. Only after every child held food did she lift her own spoon. Even then, she took only a single sip before quietly offering another spoonful to the youngest child, who accepted it with shy gratitude. Daniel remained motionless. The bowl had barely touched her lips before she was already giving it away. None of the children seemed surprised. This was clearly not the first time she had done it. He looked down at the untouched breakfast sitting in front of him. Somehow it no longer seemed like his appetite mattered very much. Across the hall, one of the kitchen volunteers noticed the same scene. The older woman quietly carried another basket of bread toward the children without drawing attention to herself. A man wearing a construction uniform